Roughly 20 years ago, Chevrolet introduced a new nameplate to their lineup called the Equinox. Now, at the time, the Equinox was designed to replace the old S10 Blazer as the brand's midsize SUV offering. And of course, since this model came out, it has exploded to become the brand's best-selling vehicle right behind the Silverado pickup truck. Now, back in 2018, Chevy actually repositioned the Equinox to be a compact SUV, competing against dominant players like the Honda CR-V and Toyota RAV4. However, for 2025, Chevy is finally introducing a fully redesigned version of the Equinox. And as you can see this week, we are testing out the sport-oriented trim, this RS Equinox painted in Lakeshore Blue Metallic. As you can see, the exterior design adopts more of the truck-like masculine design language that we've seen from other models like the Trax and the Trailblazer and the Traverse. And on the interior, the company has given this vehicle a big overhaul, giving us a massive improvement in technology. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of competitors out there in the space, so the big question I want answered, has Chevy managed to make enough changes to the bread and butter Equinox to keep this model competitive? Stay tuned to find out. So before we start talking about the updated exterior styling, which is a massive improvement over the previous generation, I thought I'd pop the hood and remind you guys what's powering this thing. Now, I remember back in the day when Chevy first introduced the third generation Equinox, they offered a choice of 3 different powertrains, including a diesel engine. However, over the years, the company basically cut powertrains that nobody was buying to basically eliminate everything except for just one. It's a carryover 1.5 liter gasoline direct injection turbocharged 4-cylinder. Now, as you can see, if you guys are familiar with Chevy products, you'll know this powertrain because they've been basically using it since 2018 in the Equinox. It also was shared with the Chevrolet Malibu. It's a 1.5 liter gasoline direct injection turbo 4. The output figures are unchanged this year versus last year's previous generation. It still makes 175 horsepower, which technically they upped the power by 5 back in 2021. However, torque output varies depending on whether you go for front or all-wheel drive. My test car is the all-wheel drive variant, which means it makes 203 pound-feet of torque versus 184. And that's because they detuned the engine's torque figure because the two drivetrains have a different transmission. So a front-wheel drive version will use a continuously variable transmission, while the all-wheel drive variant for an extra $2,000 will use a new 8-speed automatic transmission. So that replaces the old 6-speed automatic across the board. So we basically get 2 more gears. Most of you, I assume, are probably going to go for the all-wheel drive variant. That's the one we're driving here. Fuel economy is now rated at 24 in the city, 29 on the highway. That is actually 1 mpg less on the highway versus the previous generation with the 6-speed auto. So I'm really surprised that the fuel economy actually went down. It's still rated at 26 combined. You have a 15.6 gallon fuel tank. You're looking at around 400 miles of range on a full tank. That's on regular gas. 0 to 60 times, Chevy doesn't actually quote that. We'll test it out when we get this vehicle on the road. It has a top speed of around 125 miles an hour. That is an estimate. And towing capacity is around 1,500 pounds. That's average, but also less versus some competitors like the Subaru Forester or a Toyota RAV4 TRD off-road, for example, although that was just discontinued, I believe, for 2025. And as this vehicle sits, it weighs in at just under 3,700 pounds. It's actually around the same weight as last year's model, and that's because dimensionally things haven't really changed. This vehicle is riding on an updated architecture. There is no hybrid powertrain available, but if you guys want something electrified, the Equinox EV should satisfy you that, but it is a completely different platform, not the same chassis as this gas-powered version whatsoever. Closing the hood, let's go ahead and talk about the brand new exterior styling, which I have to say Chevy over the years have recently redesigned their styling language, and I think they've really knocked it out of the park. I mean, the look of this vehicle is just far more attractive. It looks more masculine. It looks more truck-like. It looks less like a rental car, which is one of the things I believe that plagued the previous generation, especially if you guys go for the new trim levels. So this is the sportier RS trim. There's also an off-road oriented Activ. The base LT I haven't had a chance to see, but that's actually a pretty well-equipped model. You can see my test car is painted in this beautiful color called Lakeshore Blue Metallic. It's actually a free color. Love the metallic sparkles in the paint. You can see there's some gloss black accents with the Chevy bow tie grille, the RS badge. You have a black Chevy bow tie grille. My test car also has the optional 360 camera system. You have full LED headlights as standard. You can see the top portion here has an LED turn signal and daytime running light. And then the bottom here, it now has a headlight cluster that's divorced from the actual running light. You have an LED low and high beam, and you also have LED fog lights. At the lower portion, you can see the RS includes a sportier looking front fascia with gloss black and some functional air openings and active grille shutters. And overall, it definitely is a much more attractive and masculine looking car. Now, moving around the side profile, this is built on an updated architecture from the 3rd generation that's designed to accept electrification. That's what I read about in the press release. And basically, that means that I'm hoping that Chevy will eventually introduce a hybrid version, but dimensionally, it's actually the same size as the 3rd generation. This is a compact SUV at 183.2 inches long with a 107.5 inch long wheelbase. This is a little bit longer than a RAV4, but a little bit shorter versus the new CR-V. It's actually a good size. The width of this vehicle, however, is 2.5 inches wider than the previous generation at just under 75 inches wide. It's also around a half an inch taller, so that's giving it that more masculine truck-like look. I also like these squared off wheel arches with the unpainted cladding that's also tastefully executed, I believe. And you can see the wheels. These are a 19-inch wheel that's included with the RS trim. They're a double 5-spoke design, 2-tone look, all disc brakes, independent suspension. You have a 235 by 55 R19 Continental Cross Contact all-season tire. There is a 20-inch wheel available, although I haven't seen what that looks like, and I can't seem to add it on Chevy's website to build. Keep in mind the Activ will include a 17-inch wheel with an all-terrain tire. That's essentially the only upgrades you're going to get. Chevy says the ground clearance is going to be the same at just under 8 inches for all models, so kind of keep that in mind. Now with the RS trim, you get the option to add this black roof, a 2-tone roof, which pairs nicely with the black painted side mirrors. These have integrated, or they have an integrated camera, but no integrated turn signals as you can see, which is surprising. My test car is missing a panoramic sunroof for an extra $1,500, but you do get the gloss black painted roof rails, which is nice. Backing away from the vehicle, you can see it just looks a lot bigger versus the previous generation, and it just looks a lot more, you know, handsome in my eyes. So let me know in the comment section below if you guys like the new design language. It definitely gives me hints of a baby Traverse, which again, I think Chevy did a great job with the look on that vehicle. Now moving around the rear, you can see brand new full LED taillight design. You can see LED turn signal, LED reverse lights, LED brake and tail lights. You have a nice rear spoiler at the back as well with that integrated rear wiper and integrated camera for the rear view mirror as well. You can see there's some badging back here. There's an all-wheel drive badge to let you know you have all-wheel drive. There's an RS badge here. The rear bumper is gloss black. There's no visible exhaust tips, which I think the RS should have included that to go off with the sportier theme. And this vehicle also includes a power-operated liftgate. Basically, if I stand near the vehicle with the key fob on you, it started to beep earlier, but of course right now it's not doing it. But basically just push the button there, it'll open up the tailgate. And this is where the Equinox does lose some cargo space compared to some rivals. You have a pretty decent, just under 30 cubic feet of space with the back seat left up. You can see there's a little bit of storage here off to the side. Well, actually, just kidding, not storage, they're off to the side. But if you open this up, there's a pretty deep storage well, which is nice. And if you pull this up, you can see there's also a temporary spare, so you don't have to deal with a fix-a-flat kit, which is also a great thing. If you want to fold down these seats, there's no release from back here. I have to basically reach up over and push the seat down. When I do that, you can see it creates a nearly flat floor, and Chevy says you have around 64.5 cubic feet of storage space, which is fine. It's certainly usable, but if you're looking for the most cargo, that's where something like the Honda CR-V, the Subaru Forester is going to give you even more space. So I think that's kind of a missed opportunity for Chevy to have improved the cargo capacity, but it is still pretty usable for most American families. So moving on to the interior of this 2025 Chevrolet Equinox. Before we get inside, however, let me show you guys the key fob. You can see this is the current intelligent access key that Chevy has been using. It has even a black bow tie logo, which I like. It's got the usual buttons here for lock, unlock, remote start, power liftgate, and panic function. The key itself is nice. It also fits nicely in your pocket. Now, as I approach the door handle, you can see it's a traditional door handle, so not one of those digital latch or pop-out door handles. There's a chrome button here. You use that button to basically lock or unlock the vehicle. There's no sensor on the back of the door handle. This vehicle does offer an auto walk-away lock function, which you can turn on and off. Push that button, you can see that unlocks the door. Sadly, there are no power folding mirrors on this vehicle. But once I open up the door, you can see this interior certainly looks a lot more upscale and premium versus the previous generation. I hope you guys, however, like a black interior with red accents. If you guys want an RS trim, this is your only color combination. You can see it's got the Evo text, which is their fake leather. It's got RS embossed in the headrest. You have contrast stitching. You have some red accents and piping. These seats are also heated and ventilated. Heated seats are standard. The ventilated seats are part of that technology package that my test car has, which also includes 8-way power driver and passenger seat with 2-way lumbar. And you also get 2-person memory, which is nice. The upper door panel here has like a kind of rubberized texture finish to it, but it's not actually padded. This, however, is nice and padded, where it has some of that Evo text with the contrast cross stitching. You have an aluminum accented door handle, piano black trim. The mirrors are only one touch auto down for all four. The driver is one touch auto up, but it's only auto down for the rest. I kind of wish Chevy would have made auto up and down for all four. There's some hard touch plastic down here with some additional storage. The sound system is not an upgraded Bose stereo system. Chevy doesn't offer an upgraded premium audio, and I have to say I wish they did, because the base sound system in this vehicle doesn't sound great. It definitely shows its weaknesses if you guys are an audiophile. Now, getting inside, you can see with just under 8 inches of ground clearance, it has a pretty nice, easy step-in height, which is great. And then if I shut the door actually has a somewhat tinny sound to it, so I don't love the way the door sounds when you close that. It doesn't add to the impression of quality. Now you can see the technology, however, in this vehicle is a big upgrade versus the previous generation. When I want to start the vehicle up, start-stop button is located here behind the shifter, which as you can see is now column mounted. When I turn the vehicle on, you can see every version of the Equinox will basically get dual 11-inch displays. And then over here, you can see there's an 11.3-inch display with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You can see my phone wirelessly connected automatically, and it definitely looks really nice. Unlike the electric version, this car does include the wireless phone integration, and this screen is around 3 inches larger versus the previous generation. Remember, the old model came standard with a 7-inch display that you could upgrade to an 8-inch display. This is, again, just a huge upgrade, so I really love that. No heads-up display is available. That right there is for your automatic emergency braking. It's a safety light, basically. This upper portion here is surprisingly soft touch injection molded plastic, more of that leatherette material here on this part of the dash. There's this kind of interesting color changing glossy black plastic, which changes over to red. It actually fades over to red. More piano black over here. You have traditional air vents, which is nice. You have dual zone climate control. You have your heated seats along with your ventilated seats. That's part of that option package. So I like how Chevy at least offers a ventilated seat. And then you can see here, the steering wheel is also really thickly bolstered. It feels really good in your hands with the thick rim. It's got contrast cross stitching. It's got a flat bottom design with the RS badge. You can see the wheel itself offers a manual power or manual tilt and telescoping arrangement, which offers a good amount of adjustability and range. The horn, it actually sounds decent. It doesn't sound like a puny, pathetic horn, even though this is a smaller SUV. There's a couple of buttons here for your electronic parking brake, your auto start, stop, defeat, auto hold, and then your all-wheel drive switch, where you can lock it in all-wheel drive or leave it in two-wheel drive. There's also a heated steering wheel. A heated steering wheel is actually standard on even the LT trim, along with heated seats, so kind of keep that in mind. It's got a good amount of standard equipment. I also appreciate the actual hard buttons and knobs for the climate. You have an actual knob there for your volume control. And then if you guys want to go back to the native system here, you can see it does have Google built in, where you can also go to the Google Play Store, download Waze, download Spotify if you guys don't want to use wireless phone integration, but I would ignore that and just use my smartphone anyways. The embedded GPS also is a nice upgrade. You can see it's basically got Google Maps built in. It's basically the same map you're going to find in your computer, for example, which is great. Your headlight controls did move into the screen, so if I want to access that, I basically can go to the controls there. I can go to more controls. I can go to lights. That's where you can adjust some of your controls here. A lot of GM products have been going to this, which is fine, because most of you need to just leave it in automatic anyways, and it'll automatically turn the lights on and off for you. But overall, you can see the system is very quick and snappy. It's responsive. It has Google built in, where you can use it, give it voice commands. And you can see my test car here also has the full 360 camera, which gives you multiple different views and side curb views to keep you from curbing the wheels. So camera quality and resolution is definitely an improvement. And it's nice that my test car also has that 360 camera. That's part of an option package. Now, down over here in the center console, there's a nice little storage compartment. You've got 2 USB charging ports, an A and a C, which is nice. You have a wireless phone charging pad here, which is optional. Part of that convenience package. And then you can see there's a lot of piano black plastic trim here. I don't love that. There's a nice padded center console. And this right here is your drive mode selector. I actually don't understand why it's such a large rotary knob, but when you rotate this knob, it basically only gives you 3 drive modes: off-road, snow and ice, and normal. For an RS trim, I'm surprised it doesn't include a sport mode, a sport driving mode. I believe off-road, however, will basically tailor back the intrusion of the stability and traction control, so that you can kind of treat it almost like a sport mode. The transmission selector is now this little stalk right here. So if I want to put it into reverse, I pull toward me and then push up to go to reverse, kick it back down to go into drive, pull toward you and hold it until it goes into neutral. There's also paddles on the wheel to control the 8-speed auto. However, if you want to access the paddles and use them, you have to push this L button here. That's where it's going to put you into the low mode, where you can access the paddle shifters. I don't understand why it's a button. Push it again, it goes back to drive. So that's a little bit strange, but it gets the job done, obviously. There's a little bit of storage underneath here, which is nice. You have 2 levels of storage with this kind of floating style center console. I mentioned earlier, this is nice and padded. Open this up, you can see it's actually deep. It goes pretty down in there to give you additional covered storage, which is nice. The seats, as you can see, they look good, but again, I wish Chevy would offer a lighter color, which you can get on the Activ trim as standard, where they give you like a brown interior. I think they call it Dune. These seats are also not more aggressively bolstered, but the padding is nice. It's relatively comfortable. So it's good on those longer trips. Open up the glove box, you can see it's a bin style. It's damped but not lined with felt. It offers a good amount of additional covered storage. There's a digital camera, rearview mirror that's included with the 360 camera, which is nice. That improves visibility. There's also LED map lighting in here, but no LED ambient lighting. It's actually totally pitch black in here at night, which I find to be a little unacceptable. Headroom space is good, but no panoramic sunroof on my test car. It's extra $1,500 that my test car is missing. And again, like I mentioned, the audio system in this vehicle is not good. I wish Chevy would offer their Bose system, but overall you can see the interior quality is pretty good. Build quality is actually much better with better materials. It's just a little bit dark in this trim, so keep in mind if you guys want a lighter color, make sure you check out the Activ trim level. Let's go ahead and hop into the backseat area and show you guys what that space is like. This is where the Equinox is actually among the most spacious you're going to find in the segment. I do wish this door opened a little bit larger. That would help if you guys are trying to load a car seat back here. Material quality is slightly downgraded, so this is now not rubberized. It's just totally hard touch plastic. This, however, is nice and padded where you rest your elbow, which is nice. Window controls, they have a nice high quality feel, but again, it's not auto up, just auto down. Lots of piano black plastic, lots of hard plastic down here. And then you can see in terms of the rear seat area, you can see it doesn't actually give you the ability to recline. You can basically just fold it down and create a nearly flat load floor. The old Equinox, if I remember correctly, offered sliding rear seats that also reclined. Obviously, they got rid of that for this new generation that they introduced back in 2018, I believe. But once you're back here, you can see the space is plentiful. Chevy says you get around 39.5 inches of legroom, which basically 40 inches of legroom is among the best in the segment. There's also a completely flat floor here for the middle passenger, which is great. You have 2 storage cubbies in each of the seat backs. You have heated rear seat, 3 levels, along with rear seat air vents. You have 2 USB-C charging ports down there, which is good. And then if you look over here, there's an armrest that folds down and gives you 2 cup holders. The headroom space, also without the pano sunroof, is plentiful. I have a good, like, maybe 3, maybe 4 inches of additional headroom space. This is also where I'd have the front seat to drive. So if you guys are looking for one of the most spacious back seats, you're certainly going to find that here in the new Equinox. So here we are behind the wheel of the fully redesigned 4th generation Chevy Equinox. Remember, this vehicle is the brand's best-selling model if you exclude the Silverado, because as you guys know, the pickup truck, their Silverado, is the best-selling vehicle in the US, but this is the best-selling passenger vehicle that Chevy has, with just over 212,000 units sold in 2023. This all-new redesigned version has been long awaited because, as you guys know, the current generation, or the previous generation Equinox, had been around since 2017. This is basically a revised chassis. It's got a carryover 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. However, we now have a new 8-speed automatic transmission. So 2 more gears versus the previous 6-speed auto. However, if you guys go for the front wheel drive, it'll have a CVT. This 8-speed auto with all-wheel drive also gives you more torque, 203 foot-pounds versus 184. So it should make for some decent performance. It is pretty much class competitive. Sadly, there is no upgraded motor or no hybrid electric powertrain. I've never 0 to 60 tested an Equinox, so let's go ahead and see what we can get. I have the transmission, or the all-wheel drive system, in all-wheel drive lock. We'll basically just brake torque it. Shifts at around 5,500. We got 8.5 seconds there on our usual run, or our usual surface, and that is a respectable time. I mean, yes, we do have over 200 foot-pounds of torque, but only 175 horsepower is not a lot. I mean, that 0 to 60 time is going to be about a second to a second and a half slower than a lot of the, speedy options in the segment. I'm talking about vehicles like the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid, the CR-V Hybrid, of course, the Mazda CX-5 and CX-50 Turbo. Those are easily going to be about a second and a half faster versus this car, but that time should be pretty adequate, especially if you guys are comparing it to the base engine like the RAV4 or in the CR-V or the CX-5, the naturally aspirated engines. And the one thing about this turbo engine is there is a noticeable amount of turbo lag. Let's try another run here. This time we won't brake torque it though. Definitely feels soft until the tach needle swings past 3,000, but then it short shifts at around 5,500 RPM. 9.3 seconds there, so That's with it more going slightly uphill. 8.5, basically the high 8 range is what you're gonna get in most day-to-day driving, because let's be honest, most people don't buy an Equinox to go 0 to 60 timing with this vehicle, but it's good for just, you know, demonstration purposes. Again, acceleration is going to be adequate. It would be nice if Chevy offered a hybrid powertrain, or, you know, the upgraded 2-liter powertrain that they used to offer, although I guess that's been replaced by the 2.4-liter turbo that's in the Traverse. But the one thing about this engine is it's paired with this 8-speed auto, which is noticeably more responsive than the older transmissions, like the old, like the 9-speed auto that Chevy is using in some of their other vehicles. It is a pretty good transmission. When I put my foot down, it's quick about snapping into its, you know, the right gear it needs to go into. But what's noticeable, however, is the turbo lag. This engine does have noticeable turbo lag, and the engine also doesn't sound great, although it also isn't as thrashy and like vibraty as like I expected in most GM engines to be. It actually sounds better versus the bigger 2.5-liter turbo that you find in the Traverse. I think I called it a 2.4. It's a 2.5-liter turbo. So kind of keep that in mind. It's basically uninspiring. It is about what you'd expect it to be in this segment. So most people who buy an Equinox, they're just gonna put their foot down. They're gonna notice that it has relatively decent acceleration because of the low-end torque response that you get, especially once the turbo kicks in. It's gonna feel adequately powered at best, although if you plan on carrying a lot of people or you wanna tow, this is where you might notice that the Equinox is gonna be lacking a little bit of power. Putting my foot down here, you can actually feel the torque steer a little bit. Even though this is an all-wheel drive vehicle, it has a front drive bias system, and it definitely has a little bit of torque steer when you put your foot down at times if you're heavy on the gas. There are different drive modes. I was driving it in the off-road setting, which is kind of like not a sport setting. There's actually not a sport setting in this vehicle, which is kind of annoying. You do have manual paddles here if you put the transmission into its L setting here. And then you kind of pull the paddles here. It should be able to engage that, although for some reason I'm not able to engage the paddle or put it into the L mode. I'm guessing I have to come to a stop to put it in L, which is kind of annoying. But there's surprisingly, for an RS trim, it not having a sport mode is kind of strange. It has a normal, a slippery, and then an off-road setting, which is, again, kind of weird how the sport-oriented trim of the Equinox is lacking a sport mode, although I imagine most people wouldn't even use it anyways. So I guess that's kind of something to keep in mind. The steering in this vehicle is light, it's pretty numb, it's devoid of feel. The suspension is definitely tuned for comfort. This is a very soft riding vehicle. Even though I'm on these 19-inch wheels, there is a 20-inch wheel available. But I would probably say, I haven't seen it on the build site. It'll probably degrade the ride quality, but this is a nice, comfortable, quiet vehicle. The Evo Tech seats also are plush. They have really good padding to them. They just don't hold you in place nicely. So again, it's an RS trim, but it doesn't feel sporty at all in the corners. The suspension leans a ton. You can hear the tires squealing a little bit if you start pushing it. Visibility out of the front, the side, the rear is good. This pillar, however, is on the thicker side. My test car has the technology package, basically, that rolls in that digital camera, rearview mirror, which is nice. If I don't have it on, I can still see out of the view. The view out of the back is good because of that square shape that Chevy's done with this new generation, which I very much appreciate. And it's pretty quiet in here. Aside from just a little bit of wind noise and a little bit of engine noise when you're pushing it, it actually is a really refined vehicle. So I'm pleased. I think Chevy has obviously made some changes in here that make it feel less and less like a rental car and feel more like a car that, you know, people, normal consumers will want to buy to have as their daily driver, and that's a good thing, especially when you look at the upgrades in the technology and the styling department. The old one just, I thought, was always a hideous car. I never cared for the styling. This is adopting the look of the Trax, which also, you know, kind of looks like the Blazer and the Trailblazer and the Traverse. So Chevy's got like a design language here that's all in the family, and it's good to see the Equinox is now part of that design language. Keep in mind the Equinox EV is a completely different vehicle, completely different platform, even though they share the same nameplate. I'm hoping I can get an electric version basically for me to test to show you guys at some point. Now, in terms of fuel efficiency, this powertrain is rated at 24 in the city, 29 on the highway. It actually went down by 1 mpg on the highway, despite the fact that we have 2 extra gears, which I find really perplexing. In my week's worth of testing, I averaged just shy of 25 mpg in mixed driving. On the highway, the best that I could do is around 27 mpg, so a little bit less than the EPA's numbers. with a full tank of fuel, you should be able to do around 400 miles of range. I was doing around 380, 375. So you could probably do better depending on how you drive. Sadly, Chevy doesn't offer Super Cruise on this vehicle, which would be nice. You do get adaptive cruise control as standard, and you also get lane keep assist, forward collision warning, and automatic emergency braking. All that is included. My Tesla also has the surround view camera. That's part of that technology package that rolls in that digital camera review mirror. So overall, this is a very nicely packaged vehicle. It's easy to live with, it's easy to drive, it's pretty uninspiring to drive as well, but I think that's probably a good thing for the majority of people who buy Equinox vehicles or Equinox models. But again, if you're looking for something with better fuel efficiency, more power, more pizzazz, more sex appeal, more sportiness, there's clearly better options out there. But I think that Chevy has definitely done a great job here at significantly upgrading the Equinox, especially if you guys are coming from the previous generation. So even though the Chevrolet Equinox would not be the first compact SUV that I would personally recommend if you're asking me which one to actually buy, you can't deny the strong sales figures of the current generation, because last year in America, Chevrolet managed to sell a little over 212,000 units. That's despite the fact that the previous generation was on its way out. So clearly there are still a lot of people that are looking to buy an Equinox, and after spending a full week with the all-new 4th generation, there are some major upgrades here. Obviously the exterior styling I think is a big win for Chevy. It finally looks less like a rental car, less like a minivan, and looks a little bit more like a desirable small SUV that most people are going to want to buy with its truck-like design language. The interior also got a huge upgrade. I love the new 11-inch display, which is like 3 inches larger versus the previous generation. It just looks a lot more modern. It has Google built in, it has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is not something that you can get in the electric version of the Equinox, so kind of keep that in mind. The back seat also offers class-leading space. The cargo area is competitive, but it's also a lot smaller versus some of its rivals, so that's something to keep in mind if you guys require maximum cargo. And also keep in mind if you guys are looking for better fuel efficiency and a more spirited drive, that's where the Equinox does fall short, because as you guys saw, 0 to 60 happens in 8.5 seconds, which is competent. However, driving this vehicle around, it's also competent, it's comfortable, it's easy to drive, it's easy to see out of, it's easy to park. But as a driving enthusiast, I prefer something with a little bit more pizzazz, and I think also most people are going to want something with better fuel efficiency, because as you guys saw, I was averaging around 25 mpg, which is also fine, but you can easily get close to 40 mpg in something like the Honda CR-V hybrid, the Toyota RAV4 hybrid. There's also the Mazda CX-50 hybrid, which uses the RAV4's powertrain, and then of course there's the Hyundai and Kia twins, which also offer hybrid powertrains. So just keep that in mind. I'm hoping Chevy will eventually, fill that void by offering an Equinox hybrid. I suspect they offer one of those powertrains in other markets, so I think there's room for that here in the US. GM is now recommitting themselves to hybrid powertrains, so that's something that I expect them to add in the coming years. Now, if you guys are looking to put the new Equinox in your driveway, these are already at Chevrolet dealerships, and pricing for this model has actually been kept relatively in check. At a base price for the LT with 2-wheel drive, it costs $28,600. That's only around $600 more expensive versus the previous generation, and it also undercuts the base price of most rivals by a couple $1,000s. If you guys want all-wheel drive, it'll cost you $2,000 more. If you guys want an RS or an Activ trim, it's going to cost you around $5,000 more, because Chevy basically positions those two vehicles at the top end. It just basically depends on which aesthetic do you want. Do you want a sportier aesthetic like this, or do you want an off-road aesthetic like the Activ? So it's kind of great that Chevy offers a choice and two essentially similar top trims. My particular test car has about $2,000 worth of options to a convenience package 3, and of course the technology package. With destination, my test car here checks in at around $38,400. So just under 40 grand is actually a pretty good deal. It is missing a panoramic sunroof for an extra $1,500, which would push the price to just under $40,000, which is still about the same price as its rivals or a little bit less expensive. But again, keep in mind those more expensive rivals offer more power or better fuel efficiency courtesy of a hybrid. So I think if Chevy offered that and they increased the price, it would still be worth it. But I am happy to say that the new Equinox is actually now worth a look in my book versus the previous generation where I thought it was more reserved for rental fleets. So kind of keep that in mind. If you guys like the styling, if you like the technology, this is definitely worth a look if you're shopping for an always competitive compact SUV. But while that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the fully redesigned 2025 Chevrolet Equinox. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.